Hey, it's Klaus Schwab, back again to read to you from my plans. Yes. Today we are carrying on from page 16 of the introduction. Okay. To begin elaborating a meaningful response. Sorry, let me get that down. We need a conceptual framework or a simple mental map to help us reflect on what's coming and to guide us in the making sense of it. Insights offered by history can be particularly helpful. This is why we so often search for a reassuring mental anchor that can serve as a benchmark when we are forced to ask ourselves tough questions about what will change and to what extent. In doing so, we look for precedents, with questions such as, is the pandemic like the Spanish flu of 1918? Estimated to have killed more than 50 million people worldwide in 3 successive waves? Could it look like the Great Depression that started in 1929? Is there any resemblance with the psychological shock inflicted by 9/11? All things which were contrived by us. Yes, that is correct. Are there similarities with what happened with SARS in 2003 and H1N1 in 2009, albeit on a different scale? Could it be like the great financial crisis of 2008, but much bigger? The correct, albeit unwelcome, answer to all of these is no! None fits the reach and pattern of the human suffering and economic destruction caused by the current pandemic. The economic fallout, in particular, bears no resemblance to any crisis in modern history. As pointed out by many heads of state and government in the midst of the pandemic, we are at war, but with an enemy that is invisible. Just like Trumpy said, right? Just like Donald Trump said. The invisible enemy. We love that line, and we love Trump here at the World Economic Forum. And of course, metaphorically, if what we are going through can indeed be called a war, it is certainly not a typical one. After all, today's enemy is shared by all of humankind. That said, World War II could even so be one of the most relevant mental anchors in the effort to assess what's coming next. World War II was the quintessential transformational war, triggering not only fundamental changes to the global order and the global economy, but also entailing radical shifts in social attitudes and beliefs that eventually paves the way for radically new politics and social contract provisions. Like the feminist movement, like women joining the workforce before becoming voters. There are obviously fundamental dissimilarities between a pandemic and a war that we consider in some detail in the following pages, but the magnitude of their transformative power is comparable. And that was a great war because the state of Israel was born out of that. And they became eternal victims. And if you ever say anything to the contrary of that, then we can just point our fat fingers at you and say anti-Semitic. Thank you, Lord Rothschild, for the state of Israel. It has been very important to our plans. Both have the potential to be... I think I already read that line. However, we must beware of superficial analogies. Even in the worst case, horrendous scenario, COVID-19 will kill far fewer people than the Great Plagues, including the Black Deaths or World War II did. Furthermore, today's economy bears no resemblance to those of past centuries that relied on manual labor and farmland or heavy industry. In today's highly interconnected and interdependent world, that we have forced it to be that way. However, the impact of the pandemic will go well beyond already staggering statistics relating simply to death, unemployment, and the bankruptcies, because we already knew what the lockdowns were going to do to people health-wise and what these injections would do to people. We already knew all of the fallout that would come from that. Now let's see, I think this is going to be wrapping up the introduction soon. Okay, COVID-19, The Great Reset, is written and published in the midst of a crisis whose consequences will unfold over many years to come. And like I said before, I wrote this book right when the crisis broke out. And I wrote it, this big, long-ass book, very quickly. Very, very quickly. Little wonder that we all feel somewhat bewildered, a sentiment so very understandable when an extreme shock strikes. Extreme shock strikes. That sounds like could be a good YouTube channel name. Bringing with it the disquieting certainty that its outcomes will be both expected and unusual. This strangeness is well captured by Albert Camus in his 1947 novel, The Plague. Yet, all these changes were, in one sense, so fantastic and had been so precipitate. I've already heard of that word before. Precipitally, that it wasn't easy to regard them as likely to have any permanence. Now that the unthinkable that we created is upon us, what will happen next in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic and then in the foreseeable future? Well, tune in next week when we continue our story here, and we will go ahead and finish the introduction. I believe my boyfriend has some food ready for me now, so I have to go. This is Klaus Schwab signing out.